Why has the Israel-Palestine conflict been so hard to resolve? To understand this, we have to start from the very beginning. In the late 19th and early 20th century, a movement was stirring in Europe. It was called Zionism, a political ideology advocating for the establishment of a Jewish state in the historic land of Israel, a homeland for the Jewish people. This was motivated by centuries of persecution and longing for a place they could call their own. Meanwhile, the land they eyed had been inhabited by Arab populations for centuries, who saw this as their home. This land, known as Palestine, was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. But things were about to change. World War I marked the end of the Ottoman Empire, and the land of Palestine fell under British control. In the midst of the war, in 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. This document expressed Britain's support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. To many Zionists, this was a green light for the realization of their dream. But what about the Arab population of Palestine? The Balfour Declaration also stated that nothing should be done to prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. However, as Jewish immigration increased, tensions between the Jewish immigrants and the Arab population escalated. The British, who were now ruling Palestine, were caught in the middle. They tried to manage the situation by limiting Jewish immigration and appeasing Arab leaders, but this only seemed to fan the flames of resentment on both sides. In the late 1930s and 40s, the situation reached a boiling point. Violence erupted between Jewish and Arab communities, and the British found themselves unable to control the situation. They decided to hand the problem over to the United Nations, setting the stage for the next act of this ongoing drama. And thus the stage was set for a conflict that would span over a century. The year 1948 marked a significant turning point in the conflict. In this year, the State of Israel was established, a monumental event that significantly reshaped the map of the Middle East. This was the culmination of decades of Zionist efforts, a movement advocating for the re-establishment of a Jewish homeland in the territory defined as the historic land of Israel. The United Nations had proposed a partition plan, dividing the land into Arab and Jewish states, but this was rejected by the Arab states and Palestinians. However, the birth of Israel was not a peaceful event. It was immediately followed by the First Arab-Israeli War, also known as the War of Independence in Israel. 5 Arab nations, namely Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, launched a military intervention in response to Israel's declaration of independence. This was a bloody and brutal conflict that resulted in significant loss of life on both sides. One of the most significant outcomes of this war was the displacement of a large number of Palestinians. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were either expelled from their homes or fled in fear. This event, known as the Nakba or the catastrophe in Arabic, is still a painful memory for the Palestinian people and a major point of contention in the conflict. The war ended in 1949 with the signing of several armistice agreements between Israel and the Arab states. However, these agreements were not peace treaties. They merely ended the hostilities but left many issues unresolved. The borders were not clearly defined, and the status of the Palestinian refugees remained unsettled. Moreover, the geopolitical implications of the war were far-reaching. It led to a major reshuffling of alliances and power dynamics in the Middle East. It also set the stage for future conflicts as the animosity between Israel and its Arab neighbors was far from over. The 1948 war left deep scars and unresolved issues, further fueling the conflict. Fast forward to 1967, a year that would reshape the map of the Middle East. In the early days of June, a conflict erupted that would forever change the course of history in the region. This was the Six-Day War, a swift but significant battle between Israel and its neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In what seemed like a blink of an eye, Israel managed to seize the West Bank from Jordan, the Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and the Golan Heights from Syria. But what was seen as a military triumph for Israel soon became a quagmire of political, social, and diplomatic complexities. The occupation of these territories sparked a wave of controversy and contention, both regionally and globally. The aftermath of the Six-Day War marked a pivotal moment in the history of Palestinian nationalism. As Israel extended its control over the West Bank and Gaza Strip, the Palestinian people found themselves under Israeli rule. This provoked a surge in Palestinian nationalism, with an increased call for self-determination and statehood. The Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, emerged as the major representative body for the Palestinians, advocating for their rights and leading the resistance against Israeli occupation. Meanwhile, the Six-Day War also drew significant international attention. Countries around the world started to take sides, either supporting Israel's right to self-defense or condemning the occupation as a violation of international law. This international involvement added another layer to the already complex conflict, leading to a gridlock that has persisted for decades. As the dust settled, the map of the Middle East had been redrawn, new borders were formed, new disputes arose, and the seeds of today's conflict were sown. The occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Golan Heights, and Sinai Peninsula by Israel became a focal point of the Israel-Palestine conflict, fueling tensions that would last for generations. The Six-Day War and its aftermath only intensified the Israel-Palestine conflict, making resolution even more complex. The events of 1967 cast long shadows over the region, shaping the contours of the dispute and setting the stage for the struggles that continue to this day. As we move into the 21st century, the conflict has evolved, but the resolution seems as elusive as ever. The last 2 decades have seen a series of significant events that have shaped the current state of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Second Intifada, a period of intensified Israeli-Palestinian violence, erupted in the early 2000s. It was marked by suicide bombings, shootings, and violent protests, leading to high civilian casualties on both sides. Years later, the conflict deepened with the Israeli blockade on the Gaza Strip, a densely populated area on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, home to nearly 2 million Palestinians. The blockade, which restricts the movement of goods and people, has led to a severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza, exacerbating the already volatile situation. On the diplomatic front, the peace process has been a roller coaster ride with peaks and troughs. Peace agreements were signed, only to be followed by renewed violence. The issues at the heart of the conflict, the status of Jerusalem, Israeli settlements, and the rights of Palestinian refugees, remain contentious and unresolved. Jerusalem, a city of immense religious significance, is claimed as a capital by both Israel and Palestine. The Israeli settlements, built on lands captured during the Six-Day War, are seen by Palestinians as a major obstacle to peace. They argue that the expanding settlements erode the possibility of a viable Palestinian state. On the other hand, Israel sees these settlements as a security measure and a manifestation of their historical and religious claims to the land. Meanwhile, the rights of Palestinian refugees, who were displaced during the Arab-Israeli wars, continue to be a major point of contention. Palestinians demand the right of return, while Israel fears that this could alter the country's demographic balance. Adding to this complex scenario, public sympathy for Palestinians among Americans has been on an upward trajectory, particularly among Democrats. This shift, driven by social media and intersectional activism, could potentially influence U.S. policy and the Democratic Party's stance on the conflict. Despite numerous attempts at peace, the conflict continues, with both sides holding onto their narratives and claims. The Israel-Palestine conflict, with its deep-seated historical grievances, divergent narratives, and geopolitical implications, remains one of the most intractable issues of our time. So, why has this conflict proven so hard to resolve? Let's first consider the issue of land and borders. At the heart of this discord is a territorial dispute. Both Israel and Palestine lay claim to the same land, each with historical and religious ties that make compromise difficult. The question of where to draw the borders is contentious, especially when it involves Jerusalem, a city of immense religious significance to Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. Speaking of Jerusalem, its status is another sticking point. Israel considers it its capital, a move not internationally recognized. Palestinians, on the other hand, see East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state. Its cultural and religious importance cannot be overstated, and its division is a matter of intense debate. Then there are the refugees, a legacy of the wars and displacements that have marked this conflict. Millions of Palestinians live in refugee camps, many in abysmal conditions, dreaming of a return to their ancestral homes. Their right to return, however, is a complex issue fraught with demographic, political, and practical implications. Security concerns are also a major hurdle. Israel cites its right to defend itself from attacks and insists on stringent security measures. Palestinians, meanwhile, decry the Israeli military's presence and the restrictions placed upon them. Trust is hard to come by, and each act of violence only deepens the divide. Lastly, we cannot overlook the internal politics on both sides. The Israeli and Palestinian leaderships face pressures from their constituents, some of whom hold extreme views. The political landscape is fragmented and consensus is elusive. Peace deals have come and gone, but none have succeeded in fully addressing these complexities. Understanding the complexity of the Israel-Palestine conflict is the first step towards seeking a lasting resolution. It is a reminder that history, politics, and human lives are intertwined in ways that are not easy to untangle.